Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 92 of Humanity Rising. Just about every day since the 22nd of May, Ubiquity University and upwards of 400 partnering organizations from all over the world have come together to create a daily open space so that people worldwide can come together and share their experiences as we all navigate our way through this extraordinary pandemic that has put virtually all of us into some form of lockdown. We're all engaging into some form of social distancing. We're all preoccupied about our health and well-being. We're all unsure about what the future holds. So Humanity Rising has been a service to all of us, so that we can come together and not only share our experiences, but to take counsel together as to how we can increase our strategic effectiveness so that we can make a genuinely positive difference in the outcome of the pandemic and ensure that the world beyond is more sustainable and resilient, healthy, abundant, and in alignment with natural systems. The last 24 hours have seen extraordinary rises in not only the pandemic number of cases. India is now leading the world in the number of daily cases and is now behind the United States, which continues to be only 4% of the human population, experiencing 25% of all the cases and the deaths. Bob Woodward, the famed journalist, released tapes today in which you could hear Trump describing in detail how deadly this pandemic was. While simultaneously, he was disparaging the pandemic, saying it was going to miraculously go away and no one needed to wear a mask. Climate change continues to be exacerbated by the pandemic. California has been experiencing what can only be called apocalypse now, a combination of the pandemic, fires, record-breaking temperatures. 2.3 million acres have burnt and are burning, with several of the fires being the largest on record for a state that has a history of massive forest fires. The World Wildlife Fund today released what I found it kind of shocked my system, that between 1970 and 2016, the world has lost 68% of all of our wildlife. We've only got 32% less left. And given the momentum of species extinction between 2016 and 2020, you can just imagine the direction that statistic is going. These are all indicators of a world that is burning, and why scientists worldwide have been warning and urging governments, institutions, corporations, the public, to take seriously that we are running out of time. To either turn this thing around by coming back into alignment with natural systems, or we will forfeit human life as we know it. So we come together day by day and we celebrate as best we can the achievements of humankind. You may remember the words of Alfred North Whitehead that Christ is crucified and the fairies dance. many things are happening simultaneously on this planet, particularly within the realm of human affairs. And today we want to celebrate and explore and just honor one of the major transposition of values that is going on in the world today. The transposition of values around human gender, human sexuality, the whole complexio of erotica. Never before have human beings undergone such an extraordinary transition where the very meaning, definition of what it means not only to be male and female, but what it means to be human is under radical transformation. I would like to now turn it over to my co-moderator, Sabinije van Gaffke, who joined as the result of Humanity Rising, and she will introduce our program. Sabinije.
Thank you very much, Jim, and also a warm welcome to all our audiences in the chat room and also on all our 40 live stream partners around the world and FB Live. It truly is such a gift of joy to see you joining us each and every day, and a warm welcome to all of you who might be new to Humanity Rising Summit. Each and every one of you are joining the conversation and thereby also being a catalyst. Now, yesterday we spoke about the need for a new narrative, and we've spoken about that quite a lot during Humanity Rising. And I feel it's also important to create a new, or let's say upgraded vision of humanity, our future, and what it means to be human. And we obviously talk a lot about gender in our society today. And of course, this includes diversity, inclusion, and so many aspects, but also a multidimensional perspective of what it means to be human and what defines to being human. And I also find that to create our future vision, we also have to remember our history. And that includes remembering that genders beyond the binary have existed for as long as the concept of gender itself. And different people use different words to describe their different experiences with gender, and especially so with all the generations that are walking on this planet today. And raising awareness about this is such important work. It truly is. And that's why today's session is part and contributing to raising this awareness, as our panel will talk about breaking binaries from gender rigid to really gender expansion, and how our journey for equality and equity and wholeness and vulnerability and authenticity is changing the world and will continue to change the world for the better if we allow it. And one of the most beautiful gifts that we humans can give each other is to really have that sense of acceptance, curiosity, an open mind, and a coherent heart. Because just like the beauty of the rainbow with all its color and its color palette, so goes also for humanity. It's our differences that makes us unique, that makes us beautiful. And that is what makes walking on this planet as hopefully a unified humanity a really unique and sacred experience too. So before I hand over the word to our panel and today's convener, Susan Davis, I just want to take a minute. We've done this a few times here on Humanity Rising, and I feel it's especially important today because this space will also need to allow for vulnerability, an open mind, and embracing our differences and our commonalities and similarities. So let's just do a 1-minute heart coherent meditation and breath work, and really centering our focus on our hearts and the vibration of all the hearts in this space, remembering the sense of gratitude and unity while we play this beautiful chant for 1 minute. Richard, if you play the music. And if you want to place your hand on your heart while you breathe to even feel a deeper connection, please do. And hopefully you will get some music in the background. If not else, we'll just take 6 breaths to align and have heart coherence. Thank you so much for joining in that 1 minute heart coherence. And with open hearts, open minds, and open perspectives, I hand over the word to today's convener, Susan Davis, who has a palette of experience and knowledge, being an author, adjunct professor, and civil society thought leader on social entrepreneurship and sustainable development. Susan, the space is yours.
Thank you so much, Sabinije, and to Jim. I was on a panel with Humanity Rising some weeks back. It was about leadership, and I happened to mention that I'm a lesbian feminist who had the good fortune to be able to marry when it became legal for people like me in 2012 in the United States. And because of that tiny little comment that I just tossed out, I was invited to curate this very special panel about how we're moving in this world from a very rigid definition of gender to a very expansive one, and how our journeys for equality, for equity, for authenticity and wholeness, I think, is changing the world. So I'd like to bring on this incredibly talented and rich panel and have them introduce themselves and engage in a dialogue as if we're all sitting around your kitchen table. Panelists, please join me. And let me ask Anu Gupta to please start.
So, hi everyone, what a treat to be here, and thank you so much for that lovely heart coherence. I am just as thrilled as everyone here to be participating on this very, very important topic that's really dear to my heart. So my name is Anu Gupta. I'm based out of New York City. So I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. Professionally, I'm trained as a lawyer, a scientist, an educator, and I run a benefit corporation called Be More with Anu. And what we do is we train professionals in mindfulness-based tools to break unconscious bias, particularly unconscious racial and gender bias. So you're probably wondering why is this person doing this? He's a lawyer, he's a scientist. What made him start this company? Well, actually, it started because of the theme that we'll be exploring today, this idea of really moving and breaking binaries and these boxes that all of us have been fit into. So when it comes to gender rigidity, I would be boxed in as male, as cis male. I was born a male, as a gay male. But I feel that this idea of masculinity has really been haunting me all my life. And it's really prevented me from being my true, authentic, full self. And the more I reach back into my spiritual practices, whether it's meditation and yoga or prayer and a whole host of other things, I realized that all of us as human beings have so much more potential than, you know, we permit ourselves from having. And a lot of that has to do with these boxes. You know, and for me, those boxes, of course, really start with gender and gender identity. For me, that's cis maleness, but then also move to issues of race. You know, I'm in America, I'm a person of color, I'm an immigrant, I'm Indian American, and there's so many other boxes that really limit my movement in the world. So I'm here to really share part of my journey, part of my work, some of the research around this, but then also to belong, to really imagine, how do we create a world where all of us, you know, belong everywhere? You know, as human beings, we feel a sense of belonging, both in our bodies, but also in the communities that we interact with. So of course, I'm thrilled, and we'll share more about all of this. And then I'll pass this on to Diamond. Welcome, Diamond.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I am Diamond Stylz. I am the trans daughter of, you know, I come from a line of Mississippi rural country Black women who sip lemonade on their porches, barefoot, telling stories and taking care of children and taking care of the people that they love and fighting for them and feeding them and nursing them. I come from a long, loving line of Black women, and I wanted to kind of start off with that. Professionally, I am the executive director of Black Trans Women's Inc., based in Texas. We are an organization that centers and uplifts socioeconomic standards for Black trans women. We try to position ourselves as first responders when incidents of violence. If you don't know and you've kind of been under a rock, Texas has unfortunately positioned itself as the trans murder capital of, you know, the United States now. So our work is definitely cut out for us, and we have positioned ourselves to help give Black trans people survival mechanisms to be able to thrive and survive in a world that is, you know, that our government is putting us in a position that is stacked against us. I'm also a content creator for YouTube. I have a podcast called Marsha's Plate, named after the Black trans pioneer, Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha's Plate is a platform that I created because in 2016, when the orange Cheeto looking guy was elected, you know, every time they put a mic in a trans person's face, they were talking about bathroom bill. But as a marginalized Black trans woman, there was much, much more serious things to talk about. We care about housing, we care about healthcare, we care about workforce discrimination, we care about things that actually are tangible for us to live, to actual, you know, life or death situations. And so bathroom is important, but public accommodations is important, but it's not, you know, it's not on the top of our list in regards to our life and health. And so I really wanted to create a platform. And luckily I live in a time where, you know, it's not a lot of gatekeepers. That's coming maybe, but not a lot of gatekeepers on the internet. So I can have a platform to be able to talk about, you know, culture from a Black trans feminist perspective. And that's what I do. So I'm so glad to be here amongst you beautiful people. And I want to pass it on to Shelly. How are you today?
Everyone who invited me to participate on this panel. I am the COO of Ubiquity University, and I have been interested in and impacted by...
Shelly, can you speak a bit louder?
Oh, okay, sorry. Is this better?
Yes.
Not projecting this morning. I've been impacted by the idea of gender my entire life, and looking at sociocultural norms around it, and also personal experience with it, and attempting to find a way to have a larger conversation about the many ways that gender expresses itself in thinking, in feeling, in being, and wanting to make sure that we are creating safe spaces and the kind of spaces to have these discussions, so that each person can feel honored and valued in whatever way they choose to express their gender, in whatever setting they happen to be in. And we need to have a more sophisticated discussion about gender, because people automatically associate it with sexual orientation, which is not always the case. Your gender, your gender identity, your gender expression is a part of, perhaps, but is not the totality of your particular attraction. So there's a lot of scientific things, there's a lot of social cultural things, and a lot of personal things. And I think we're going to have a fun discussion today about some of those topics. So thank you for allowing me to be here. The more we can be ourselves and authentic, the better off we'll all be as humans. So now I'd like to turn it over to Alessandro, and you take the floor.
Thank you so much, Shelly. I noticed some people were writing in on the chat that they couldn't hear you well, so I hope they can hear me well. Otherwise, let me know and I'll try to fix it. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I know you're listening to us from all over the world, and thank you for inviting me to this panel, to the organizers. My name is Alessandro Valera. I'm Italian, I'm European, I am a cis man, I am a gay man, I'm a husband, I am a father, and I am the director of Ashoka in Italy. For those of you who don't know about Ashoka, my organization is one of the largest, actually the largest network in the world for social entrepreneurs. We're active in over 90 countries, and lately we've become the place for all change makers, those who want to make change in their communities and in the world, to come together and share a strategy towards a path of everyone a change maker. I come from a small town in Italy, and when I was 16, I won a scholarship that sent me to Canada first, and then to London, one of the most liberal places on earth. And that's when I came to terms with the fact that I liked boys. And by being, this is early 2000s, London was already getting over the fact that some people are gay, unlike the place where I came from. So I had my 20s in a very comfortable environment. Also, I was in a university, which is a liberal place to begin with, and then I worked in the non-profit world, which is also more welcoming than other jobs, where still it's not easy to come out. When I was in my 30s, I came back to Italy, and that's when I realized that it wasn't just about myself. I came back to a place where there were no gay rights, when gay people were not protected from discrimination from a legal point of view. There was no gay marriage, there was no adoption, and I very much wanted to build a family of my own. So as I continued with my professional life and I became the director of Ashoka Italy, I also opened up to LGBT rights, the right of gays and lesbians, but also of bi people and trans people and many other people who don't fit with different gender identities or sexual orientations. And I think that's when the personal became political for me. At that point, I had a partner for several years, and we decided to get married where he's from, in Argentina, which got same-sex legislation a long time before Italy. Actually, they were the ones, the Argentinians, who helped us transform language to transform people, and they started talking about marriage equality rather than gay marriage, as we were doing back then. This was about equality. It wasn't about being gay or lesbians. So we got married, and I tried hard to have my marriage recognized in Italy too. And as I did that, I met many other people in my situation, and I realized that this was a battle that could be dealt not just at Italian level, but at EU level and international level. And a few years later, we also embarked on our parenting journey, and we had a beautiful daughter, and thanks to an amazing woman in Canada who helped us go through this journey. So we brought her back, and through a legal case that we don't have time for now, we were the first, or among the first 3 or 4 couples in Italy to actually receive a full recognition as both of us as parents. So I do have the little ID which has the name of both of us as parents. That is one of the first in the world, and we know how much ID are important to trans people. In this case, they're really important also to same-sex families, and as it was the recognition that we actually existed and needed to be protected. So my work doesn't evolve entirely around this topic, but let's say that my personal and private have bridged, and I now also help Ashoka as a global organization to be more attentive at issues of diversity of sexual orientations and gender identity. And with that, I'm happy to pass it on to Magogodi and hear her story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alessandro. I am Magogodi Makhene. I am a writer and the co-founder of Love as a Kind of Cure. Our social enterprise is really interested in tackling issues that are around inequalities. Gender is one of the many inequalities that we tackle. Most recently, we just did something around freedom and particularly race. We were dismantling white supremacy by practicing anti-racism in a freedom festival that we held all around. I see the snaps, thank you, Diamond. The work is really rooted in love. Our company is called Love as a Kind of Cure, and we are emphatic that the way we're going to get through all of the maladies that Jim started this conversation reminding us of, you know, the ways in which our world is sick and is ailing right now. The way that we're going to get through those maladies is through love. And I'm really excited for this particular conversation, because I am she, her. I am a woman. I was born a woman, and I was born in South Africa. I was born Black in South Africa, clearly, which immediately cast me in a very specific and to the government problematic class of people. We were a crime, as Trevor Noah loves to joke, born a crime. That was me for sure in apartheid South Africa. I bring this up because it's such a big contradiction to my experience of myself as a woman who was born with the same gender that I identify with. And it's through loving people like Susan, like Anu, and more recently, some of my other panelists like Diamond and Alessandro. It's through understanding you and your stories that I've really come to appreciate my own privilege, my deep blind spots, the misogyny that I grew up around, which I was already sensitive to as a feminist, right? But I don't think I had the depth of appreciation and understanding and education, and quite frankly, just, you know, paying attention, like opening your eyes. I think once you are honest about what you do and don't know and can and cannot see, sometimes not for your own fault, it's hard to not see it once you do. And I'm really grateful to my friends because I consider them my teachers in this particular work of making gender more fluid. And I also look often to my own culture. I'm African, and I know for sure before colonization, we were gender fluid people, as many folks around the world were. Native Americans, I'm sitting here in upstate New York, and I know that the land I'm sitting on, which was Lenape land, these were people who had a very beautiful, rich and deep and complicated way of understanding not just human life, that we come in many different shapes, flavors, design, all of it, but all of life. And that the idea of us being stuck between man and woman as the only choices is artificial and is only one way of understanding the world. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And, you know, I am a writer. I'm a bit of an interview. I'm really curious about other human beings. I'm curious to hear from my fellow panelists how they've experienced gender. How has it shown up as a lived experience for you, both in your work as well as your, you know, life. And Alessandro, you started talking about that really beautifully when you're talking about your daughter and your husband. If you can share with us as a beginning, we'd love that.
Yes, thank you. I mean, obviously, as a white man, most of the time I'm on the side of privilege. If I shut up and don't say anything, you know, I'll be on the right side. So I think that for me, being gay also opened up my eyes to systemic discrimination in other areas too, that of race, that of gender, and has made me more aware about dynamics that before, even as a liberal, open-minded, self-defined feminist, I thought that I had under control. I think this requires a lot of self-work and understanding your own biases. And this is important to me also because I'm raising a girl. And that was, you know, unexpected. And I think when we came back to Italy, we thought that we were going to experience a lot of homophobia. And actually we didn't. Most people were very welcoming and embracing of our relationship. I think there's something about kids that make even the people that think they're against something over here in their heads come on board through their hearts. But what I notice is that the gender stereotypes and misogyny was much stronger than homophobia. And let me explain this. So when I came back with my daughter was premature, so she was very tiny. And I would feed her in sitting in the park, for example. I would take her around on the bus. So people were really surprised that a father was so present in the life of a young kid, beyond knowing what my sexual orientation was. So and I would be praised for things that women do all the time without being praised. And literally this would happen every day. They were like, you're such a good father. Look at you combing your daughter's hair. And I'm like, I'm doing that too. Look over there, you know, or you're such a good dad. You help your wife so much. And I was like, well, I'm not helping her. There's no wife. And anyway, I don't think it's about helping them. It's just doing my share and enjoying that. So this has been really a transformational experience. Also seeing what the kind of products that are targeted at children, you know, this is recommended by moms. And I was like, okay, great. But I guess maybe fathers like it too, or they should like it. They should try it. So I think this has really transformed my myself also from a gender point of view, not just a sexual orientation point of view, and also realizing the kind of girl I want to raise and how to see how people box her in has made me realize that perhaps I've done it too in the past without realizing. Random people on the playground telling her like, oh, come and look at this bag, you're a girl, you like bags, and realizing like, oh, that's not maybe she likes bags, maybe not, you know? And so this has been an incredible journey for me. One more point I want to make, and then I pass it on to one of my colleagues, that I think at Ashoka we study social change, as we've had experience for 40 years to see how niche ideas that we call social innovation become the norm. And we call this system change or mindset change. And we've studied this throughout history, how abolishing slavery was the idea of few very small amount of people, and then slowly took ground, and now, at least on paper, we're all against slavery. Although, you know, let's pretend that's solved, although we know that there are still some issues. Same with universal suffrage. When women asked to vote, there was only 125 years ago for the first time. And then by now everyone agrees that that's the norm. So we've been studying also how long since a new paradigm emerged until it became mainstream, and the curve it goes through. And as we heard today about extinction of animals and climate change, I want to send a good message that indeed, while we're really lagging behind certain issues, there are some other issues where change is happening fast. For the abolition of slavery, it took 400 years from the idea to emerge until we reached a success. For every child should go to school, it took 200 years. For women should be able to vote, it took 100 years. For gay men and women should be able to get married, it took 30 years since someone attempted that until we got it. And let's remember Holland, which was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage, did it this century in 2001. So a huge amount of people have changed their opinion on this matter in a very quick time. We are at a point in time where the world is so interconnected that if we continue this kind of engagement, people will change their minds. And the more people change their minds, the more systems will change. We're more likely to vote for things to happen in a certain way. And the two, mindset shift and system change, mutually enforce each other. So my message to the next speakers is these: what are the other battles that we need to focus on when the world can come together, whether in terms of gender, sexual orientation, race, the intersectionality of all these elements, or any other battles? Well, by talking to each other and by starting changing how we think, we can then go on and change the world, really. And I know it sounds cheesy, but that's the way it is, I believe. And that's why I'm the leader of an organization that claims we can all be change makers. Otherwise, I wouldn't be the right guy for the job. So over to you, Shelly. What do you think about this? You said that it's time to change gender norms. What do you think is our next battle, and how can we come together and help each other on it?
Thank you very much. I hope my microphone is a little louder now. Is it?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay. I'll just speak louder, hopefully.
That's great. That's great.
I'm playing with the adjustments over here. Yes, we are in a moment where languaging is very important. You know, words make worlds, right? And language is how we communicate with each other. And the languaging around gender has been very, very specific in Western culture. And Alessandro, I want to thank you for mentioning, you know, privilege. I too have privilege. So I have the ability to hide what I want to hide and reveal what I want to reveal. And not everyone has that opportunity. When I was growing up in the 70s, the white hair is real. There was very little language. When I was a young kid, I was a tomboy, and that was cute. When I was in middle school and I was playing touch football with the boys in recess, that was odd. When I was in my 30s and rocking Bill Blass and ties and short hair, that was just not cute anymore. Because people didn't know exactly how to talk to me. And I didn't have the language to explain it myself. It took me a long time to develop that language and to see and to feel those reactions from people to me who expect me to be a certain way depending on how I'm presenting myself in any given situation. And I find that just as confusing. So I'm here on a panel trying to talk to a number of you out there about gender issues when I can be just as confused on a daily basis as you are. So that's, I'm very aware of that today. But I think that what I've seen in my life has been those people who accept me for however I present myself are priceless. They are priceless, that sense of acceptance. This generation coming up behind us, oh, the kids are gonna be all right. The kids have the language. The kids, the young people that my daughter associates with, they have a language that they can speak and an acceptance that I did not experience when I was their age, and I'm very grateful for that. And as they're coming up and they're seeing this institutional bias that comes down from the top in business and in social and in religious and they're very confused by what they're seeing, because they're very unconfused about who they are. And I think that that is our challenge right now as a global society. The more crises accelerate, the more tempting it is to exclude, to put in a box, to label, to marginalize what is not understood. Because as exterior crises get more, that there's this reactionary tendency, and we're starting to see that. And that's not where I think we should be going.
Right.
You know, we should be going to a more expansive humanity as we realize that these barriers, these sociocultural barriers are all in our minds. They're all made up. They're all rules that we learned. They're just beliefs. They're not true.
Right.
And so we need to actively confront those beliefs and decide what we choose to believe about ourselves, about the people in our lives, about the people that we interact with. It is a dangerous world out there for difference. And that's not acceptable. It needs to be a safe world. And that's the only way that we can do that is by showing up and talking and being open to questions and attempting to explain using whatever language tools we have and that are available to us and that we can learn from. So that's, it's very complicated. And
Absolutely.
we're all coming at it from our own perspective. And so I have my lens, but my lens is not your lens, not your lens, not your lens. And I want to honor your lenses and learn from you, because learning from you will help me with my own discussion. So anyway, so that's kind of what I think. And Diamond, I'm very interested in hearing more from you about your experience and how you're seeing these types of barriers, how you're seeing these things play out in the world, and some positive changes that perhaps we can contribute to on behalf of our brothers and sisters and everyone. If you're cis and you're straight, I love you. And if you're not, I love you too. So there you go. So Diamond, over to you.
So for me, so first of all, like patriarchy and gender oppression is like the OG. Racism is quite, if you think about it, it's kind of in the context of the history of racism, it's kind of new. The gender oppression has been going on for even longer. So that's like the OG. So in my particular life, the analogy that I usually give people is, okay, so when I'm younger, and a lot of y'all talked about the language. So for me, when I was younger, I didn't have the language at all on any of these things. I didn't get that until, you know, I started to do activist work and, you know, older and in my late 20s. I'll be 40 next year. And early on, so when I think about it, my great grandmother, she came up in a time where a woman's mobility was connected to her husband. It was connected to who she was married, who she was, you know, who she was dating and having babies by. And so she couldn't even get credit cards in her name. So once her daughters got older, and although they may not have identified as feminist, they were feminist in practice. And so what she was telling her daughters was, excuse my language, but don't, I ain't gonna say that.
Now I want to hear. No, now I want to hear what you're gonna say.
My grandmother would be like, "Don't let these motherfucking niggas control your life." Because I've been sitting here in my marriage and I ain't got nothing from them. I couldn't even go to school. I had 16 babies. Don't let them do that to you. These are country women. So they would be like, so she's teaching them, you need to have your own money. You need to have your own things. And so my grandmother took that and ran with it. So she got married because that was the part of the culture. She got married to my great granddad. And, when he was drinking and beating on her, she was like, no, ma'am, I'm taking my 2 babies and moving up to Indianapolis. And I had aunts that moved to Chicago and aunts that moved to Detroit that took that, their grandparents coming out of slavery, really making that migration up to the north. So my grandmother started her own business. She started, she just really became an entrepreneur and just started. But then, because of the racism and all this kind of stuff, she was actually boxed into the ghetto, boxed into, she couldn't get access to certain things at her time. And so when I come out of my mother, I come out of my mother in the early 80s. And so, I grow up and my mother is going through the crack epidemic. So because her mother was stuck in the ghetto, she had the mindset, she didn't even think about going to college. My mother didn't even think about going to college. She was in, horrible schools that didn't put her in a position where she could think that bigger than high school. So when I come out, my mom is a dropout. She is a teen. She had me she got pregnant when she was 16 and had me when she was 17. She had to get in low income housing, which was in the ghetto, which led to her, being exposed to the crack epidemic in the 80s. So when I was born, when I come into my, not adulthood, but my childhood, and I'm clearly a queer child.
Right.
The analogy that I use is, in my mind as a child, homophobia was, I say that I'm a little fish in the ocean and the shark is chasing me. Homophobia was the immediate danger. It was the shark. So it's chasing me, trying to eat me. So I'm running. So in my little fish, little body, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the biggest issue. This shark is chasing me and wearing me out. But what I've come to learn as I got older is that racism was the polluted water that me and the shark was in. Yes. It was the polluted water that was killing both of us. The cause of him being so hungry that he has to chase me and blah, 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 blah. And I'm the last one left for him to chase or whatever, however that analogy may work. But racism and then the bigger, and then the bigger gender oppression, which was included in why this shark is chasing me. However you want to make the analogy work, I learned that all these systems of oppression is connected as I got older. And my gender was just a small part of it. I had to, because I remember I used to be like, oh my God, I've never been, when I was young and dumb, I've never been affected. No white person has ever called me nigger. No white person has ever done that to me. No white person has done more than somebody calling me a faggot. I've gotten that. So it used to be homophobia was like the big thing, but I didn't realize the reason why I was at this poor school, the reason why I couldn't get great teachers, the reason why I was, didn't have access to therapy, the reason why we were on food stamps, the reason why we were living how we were living was because of the racism of the politicians. And though all of it wasn't immediate, although it wasn't immediate in my face, I still, this still was affecting my life. So I had to really, as I got older, really expand my mind in thinking, how are these major systems affecting me? How are they connected? How are they affecting somebody else? How are they affecting? I remember when my mom was in a batter shelter in in Boston. I remember being on a bus stop in 92. I was like 11, and these people were talking about a trans woman who was exposed that was a politician. I never heard about that. And it wasn't until I got older that that person was Althea Garrison, who was the first trans woman to be in a position, who was elected to politics in Boston. And I was 11 in Boston, and we're not from Boston. We just was randomly there for 3 years of our life because my mother was in love with somebody and moved there. So then go on to so many things that now that I'm looking back on it, like all of this stuff is connected. Fannie Lou Hamer being from the Delta, where my family was from. It's so many things are connected, and making that connection to me is what expand my mind. It is what actively looking at us and how do I connect with Magogodi, and how do I connect with Alessandro? How do I connect with Anu? How do I connect with Shelly? How can I individually see how our lives intertwine and how we can build from that connection to be able to dismantle the systems? For me, seeing that connection and seeing that history is able to give me a clear vision of the kind of future that I want, the kind of future that I want to have for our children. And for me, as a trans woman, it just put me in a Black trans woman, put me in a perfect position to be able to have the vantage point to create a better world for everybody. So, yes.
That's so beautiful, Diamond. Like all the snaps, all the fingers, all the things. Like, just, yes, preach. We are in church and we're here for it. Thank you. And what comes to mind listening to you, and this is my invitation for the panel, I think you're saying something extremely powerful about us understanding gender as coming to it, finding an entry point that is based on our own burdens that we carry, right? All of us have some privilege, all of us have some burden, some way in which we are oppressed, in which we feel like we're on the outside looking in. You can be a cis white male, and there's something in your life that maybe you grew up like a poor kid. Maybe you grew up with disabilities, you know? Maybe you just don't see the world the way that most other people do. There's always something in every human that makes us feel like we're on the outside looking in, and it's a glass door, so we can see everybody on the inside having an amazing time. There's a whole feast and we're starved, but we can't get in. And what I hear in what you're describing, Diamond, is what is the invitation for me to think about my own oppression, or, you know, I hate the word oppression because it makes me sound like I'm carrying something that cannot be transcended, or accepting other people's labels. But there's always something that keeps you at the door, right? And I'm wondering, how can we offer the audience a way of understanding gender that is based on our own, for lack of a better word, oppressions? Do you want to tackle that, Anu?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important question right now. And first of all, I want to give props to Diamond for just breaking down systemic racism in like a few sentences. Like that was basically a 101 on how the personal is connected to the systemic. So oftentimes we talk about, you know, we're all seeking freedom, we're all seeking authenticity. And yes, a lot of us are seeking it, and a lot of us are actually trying to make that happen, but it's external forces like the policies that prevent people from having housing, from having food, from having access to transportation, education, that really prevent one from really being in a place of true thriving. And that's where like this intersectional, like, you know, analysis around gender, which again is the OG, as Diamond said, is the OG. And, you know, race, class, caste, you know, ability, size, all of those things then become really, really enmeshed in it. So I think my story is very, you know, it's so similar to all of your stories, but it's also different because it's another part of this human experience. So I was born a male and quite privileged, actually. I was born in India, and I stayed there until I was 10, and I was completely oblivious to the external world, right? Because I was in this sheltered upper middle class family. And something inside me from a very young age told me that I was better because I was a boy. You know, I lived in a society that's deeply, deeply misogynistic and deeply patriarchal. So even though I have two sisters and my parents did everything possible to treat us all equitably and love us all equally and give us everything that's equal, never make us feel different, there was these social cues that I received from my surroundings from a very young age that I'm special. And by special, I am better. And that is kind of in the through line. Now, while that specialness exists, in order for me to remain special, I had to prescribe to a lot of gender roles. You know, so I couldn't just be, I had to be a certain kind of man. I had to like sports, I had to have a deep voice, I have to stay away from anything that would make me not special, which is, you know, anything that's feminine, anything that's womanly. So whether that's dressing up, you know, with more colorful clothing, dressing up like a woman, to speaking with a higher pitched voice. So anything that resembled something that was cast as, you know, womanly is inferior. And after moving to the United States when I was 10, that through line continues. But on top of that through line, there were all these other identities that were plastered on. Identities of immigration, not being from here, being other. You know, of course, the huge one was race and ethnicity. For me in the 90s, I'm not black, I'm not white. What am I? Other, right? What does that mean? I'm a foreigner. I don't belong. And that kind of really continued onward for me for a very long time. And for me, that's what I latched onto, because that was where I felt so, again, I don't like the word oppression either, but so excluded. Like, because I can't change the way I look. I can't change my skin color. But that was really, really used to weaponize against me and to remind me that somehow I am inferior. And all I want to do is be just loved, be seen, be heard. And that's what all of us want to do, regardless of our gender identity, our gender expression, our racial, ethnic identity. We just want to be seen. We just want to be heard. We just want to be cared for. And for me, that took a huge toll. You know, I became severely depressed about 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago, and started questioning myself. All this messaging in our society about who we are, I bought it. So I thought there was something wrong with me because I'm of this origin. I pretended to be white because that's what's really valued in our society, to the point that I almost committed suicide, right? Thankfully I didn't, yet that aspect of it was so present for me. You know, when I stood at this ledge, and you know, I am privileged that somehow I didn't, but so many trans kids don't survive that. So many gay kids don't survive that. So many straight kids don't survive that. So many homeless kids don't survive that. So for me, you know, people are like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Are you on Medicare? I'm like, it doesn't matter. I got the help I needed. Yet, I think it's important to share these stories because all of these identities, they really take such a huge psychological and emotional toll on us. And at the end of the day, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Like, to excuse my French, because why someone just told me that, you know, they're better than me because they said so and they feel like it, and I believed it. And this goes back to what Shelly was saying, this idea of fear. And this is how we give our internal power away to an external narrative. And that is what we need to break down. Of course, that is happening right now with the Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives in our country, in America, but also really around gender with Me Too, really becoming a force to actually enable female identified people to really speak up. But I think we need to move beyond these boxes. You know, one of my favorite authors and teachers was Grace Lee Boggs. And she was like, you know, race, gender, class, all these things are still boxing us in. And it's preventing us from really beginning to imagine the true potential that exists for us all. So I want to kind of say that, and like, what is the cure for that? Because that's what I've dedicated my life to. And for me, what the cure for that is to really take the longest journey that most of us will ever take. And I'll say this because I used to work as a human rights lawyer. I worked in economic development in various countries. That took me away from New York to South Korea, to Myanmar, to Malaysia, to Mexico, to Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. Yet the longest journey that I've ever taken in my entire life is from my head to the heart. That's the longest journey that all humans because we're so conditioned to be stuck in our heads. And for me, the way to do that is really about understanding our mind and really breaking bias. These perceptions, these conditioned realities are not ours. These thoughts that we have are things that we've consumed from the society around us. But there's so many tools that now neuroscientists, social scientists have really created for us to really build new habits. And this goes back to what Alessandro was talking about. It really starts with, shifting mindsets, realizing that all of us, regardless of what we look like, what our body parts are, we're human beings. So what is that inclination for us to create a hierarchy, to assign value to one another? And then how can we take that back to really enable our true flourishing, and then also to advance other people's true flourishing? And to do that, for me, is really around practicing mindfulness and mindfulness-based tools. Slowing down. Slowing down is really important in a society that's running, right? So that's one of the positive things about, Queen Corona, right? Is that she's allowed us to stop, ceaseless growth, ceaseless greed. Look at that, and look at the society we're living in. So I think for me, it's really about breaking down these biases, first individually, but in communities, right? If I'm breaking bias, and all of us are breaking our internalized biases, our interpersonal biases, then we can together begin to shift these institutions and systems that continue to make us feel like we don't belong, and really take the baton onwards. So as I say that, Magogodi, I'm curious how that's landing for you, given I know a little bit about your story and how far you've come. I would love to hear what's arisen for you.
I just want to listen, because you're just sharing so much wisdom, and what resonates most to me from what you've said is the journey from mind to heart, which is both infinite, but it's also the deepest journey that we take, as you said. I think also, I think about a number of things. In relationship to this conversation, I'm really most interested in leaving the audience with some ways, some activation towards understanding gender in a more expansive way, right? And looking around the room wherever you are, and getting curious, becoming a little bit more interested in what's happening with your neighbors, with people who are sitting next to you, and beginning to ask the kind of questions that you might not be asking because of your own gender, but because you love somebody like Anu, and you want to understand, well, how do you move from a world that sees you as special because you're born as a boy in India, to a world that understands you as something that needs to change because you're announcing yourself as gay and you're brown and you're living in the United States. And what I heard when Diamond was speaking, which got me very excited, is how do I tap into my own insecurities or my own vulnerabilities in order to see the other more fully, right? In order to understand, I might not understand it at the experiential level. I'm not living in Diamond's body. I don't have her experience. I'm not in Shelly's body. I don't have that lived experience, but I definitely know what it's like to be shut out, to be on the outside.
Exactly.
And so I'm really interested in that conversation. I come to it because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, because I was raised in South Africa. And my personal experience at the intersection of all of those things is very quickly understanding the world does not see the awesome sauce that is all of this. Because, you know, being in all white spaces in apartheid South Africa, I very quickly got the message, hey, you're the odd one out here. But being the odd one out actually turned out into an enormous gift my entire life, because it helped me very quickly zero in on who else around here looks like they're feeling that vulnerability. They're feeling shut out. They're feeling as though they don't belong. And what I'm excited about in the work that this panel is doing, but honestly, I think the eruption of 2020 is our vulnerabilities being exposed, all of us, right? And we're kind of living in this really messy shitstorm where everything, it's like our guts are just out in the street and everybody can just see everything that's nasty about us. But it's actually a very exciting time if you consider that it's only through those vulnerabilities and that messiness that we get to be fully human with one another, right? Part of the work of traveling from your mind to your heart is getting comfortable with that nastiness, that messiness, letting it all hang out and not need to fix it immediately, being okay with things being uncomfortable. Somebody earlier in the chats was mentioning or asking the whole panel, are we okay with categories? And I'm thinking about this in the lens of gender. I'm not entirely sure what the question exactly was, but I think it may hint, I think the question may want to hint as this thing of, you know, we're living in a world of language being exploded, as Shelly was saying, right? And we're stepping on each other's toes all the time. I mean, I've had to learn the word they, and I've had to learn to use it with people who were introduced to me as she, her. So of course I've made mistakes. And what I'm interested in is how do we move forward with love, knowing that we're going to fuck up? Like that's part of what being human is, right?
And I think that's where you're demonstrating this idea of compassion and empathy. I think that is the liberatory tool that all of us need right now. And that is what we see lacking in the all-white, mostly male leadership in our country, in the United States, but also in countries across the world, wherever there's, you know, authoritarianism that's rising, where there's populism rising, there's this lack of empathy from the top down. And also, like when you talk about these all-white spaces where you felt like you didn't belong, sometimes I wonder, from the space of compassion, and I'm curious what other people think around this, like what must it be like to be in the bodies of those people? Because they feel so separate from the vast number of human beings that exist on this planet. And the only thing that makes them feel comfortable around other human beings is their skin color, right? Or their gender. And I'm like, wow, like what a limited way of living. Yet, as Diamond explained earlier, this is how our systems have been set up. And it's these individuals that are making decisions that impact our ability, everybody on this panel, to really live a life of true flourishing. So how do we move? How do we move these systems? What do we need to do? Yes, Diamond, you are the leader, please.
One of the first thing you have to do is be bold about your embrace of people. Be bold about empathy. Be bold about curiosity. Be bold about how you come to see other people's experiences. You would think that as a trans person, especially with all the narratives about how much oppression is affecting us. For me, as a binary trans person, so we know that transness is rooted in the binary. So it's like, are you trying to shake up these categories? But for me, that's what non-binary people are. The theys, that's what they're bringing into question in our particular community. They're shaking it up. They're saying this binary thing is not working, and so it's giving me as a trans woman the freedom, because I have the privilege of passing in some moments, and I'm trying to look at cis heteronormative as possible, that comes with a privilege with somebody who is not trying to do that. I'm trying to shake it up and be me, and however that presented. And so what that does is give me room that when a non-binary person gives me, expressing themselves however they want to express, gives me room that when I fail at being as cis-normative as I could be, when I fail, I still can be free. I still can be, oh my God, I get to, if I got a little stubble on my chin, if I got a short haircut, however I present, if I fail at whatever society says that a woman looks like, non-binary people are there to say, that is okay. They're shaking that system up. And I make that connection with, when you talked about cishet white men, although y'all are in a place of privilege, us shaking up this feminine and masculine, it allows you to be free to be a whole man, and however you want to be a man. You don't have to be a part of this patriarchal box. You don't have to, you can come as a feminine man, or as a, however that may manifest in your life. You don't have to be that same guy doing the locker room talk just to, talk about grabbing people's pussy just to get some kind of cool points for the other guys. Right. Like, you don't even have to be in that space. And what we are doing is shaking that up so we all can be free. So we all can, that goes back to us being all connected. You have to be bold about your embrace of people, because that boldness allows you to see people clearly and see your connection with them. How does this person being free lets me be free? How can, if I'm looking past, let's take it in a class sector. So when we're only giving platforms to people with degrees, how are we learning from the poor who don't have degrees? If I'm trying to win a war, I'm going to use this for the lack of anything. If I'm trying to win a war, I am going to go to the soldier who is in the trenches at the fight. I'm not going to go to the general sitting up in a box watching from another place. I want to see what's happening with the soldier. So if I'm trying to dismantle capitalism, if I'm trying to dismantle classism, I want to talk to the poor people who have a direct connection to how these systems are affecting them. I'm not going to talk to the PhD. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to talk to the hood woman on food stamps who is directly affected when Trump is cutting the SNAP. When Trump is cutting food stamps and she has to decide on whether to get her insulin or to get her baby some food. Like, I want to talk to her. I don't want to talk to the Harvard graduate. I'm sorry. I don't want to talk to him because he don't know. Making those connections and being bold about your embrace of people who are different from you, who may, being bold about that embrace is what makes the difference. That is love. That is what it is. That's the cure, as you said.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That was really resonate. All of that really resonates. I love what you're saying. And Magogodi, to go back to the question of what can we do? What could other people do in their own lives? And my only advice is to love yourself. You got to start here, and it's not easy, and it's not intuitive, and we're not really taught how to do it. You have to learn to love yourself and let yourself be free in your own mind. And it's a struggle. When I see the idealized feminine or I see the idealized masculine, I don't fit either one. And that really hits your self-esteem in the stomach. Like, I have tried really hard to wear makeup. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone and I bought the primer and the foundation and I'm trying to figure this out. And I always look somewhat like, Joan Jett and Bozo, like, put together. It's just not a good look. And then I try to be more masculine, but that doesn't really work either because I'm obviously feminine. And so buying a suit in a male store doesn't work because it doesn't fit, And so and all of that is embarrassing and personal, right?
Right.
until I can say, I'm just going to have to love myself and be a leader in whatever that means for me. I'm not necessarily going to have the feminine characteristics that people are expecting me to have, and I'm going to have too many masculine characteristics that are going to weird people out. And that's just going to have to be what I can be. And if I can love myself, and if we can love ourselves and give ourselves that freedom to look at those things inside of us that don't make sense, that we've tried to put away and not look at and shove away, if we can do that with ourselves, I think we can do that with others. And I think that that is the key to all of it for me. And so love yourself, speak yourself, live your life, try to see your characteristics as yours.
I love
not
Shelly.
necessarily anyone else's.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I see a few things in the chat, and I'd love everybody to respond to this. There's some discomfort in the chat where people are saying, you know, leadership in India isn't white. So there's some discomfort around whiteness that some of our audience members feel right now. And they're saying that some of us are just bashing white people right now. So I would love for people to comment on that. Of course, I can too, but would love to hear what this is about.
Anu, can you just contextualize that a little bit more? What exactly, is there a question that's attached to it, or what exactly is the...
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the person or the persons were saying, but my understanding is that whenever we talk about race, particularly when we talk about whiteness, there is a sense that people, and this could be people of color as well, there's like a fear that gets attached to it, right? And here we're talking about cis white men, right? So for me, the contextualization for that is really capitalism and globalization and global colonialism, you know, genocide of native peoples, whether it was colonization of my ancestral homeland, India, or where I've been living in the country that I'm now part of, America. It's run by mostly cis white men, and it's their decisions that really color my day-to-day lived experience. But I'm curious, like, how do we bring that idea of empathy and compassion that's preventing people from hearing us? How do we build that both within ourselves? Because it does kind of target, it feels a little like, oh, what I'm saying is invalid. Once again, I'm like going back to that little kid that the little brown kid, was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. You know, this white man, you know, is saying that I'm wrong, so I must be wrong. But also, like, what tools can we give them to begin to investigate this within themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can say something, sorry,
Please.
As a representative of the category. I think that sometimes, and I think this goes for gender and sexual orientation too, when we talk about our own suffering being the other, the listener who's in the majority category may feel that you're pointing a finger and that you're assuming they're not suffering or they've never suffered. That's why I really like what Magogodi said about, and many of you went back to that, about we've all been the other at some point. So of course, we can hide some otherness, as Shelly said, more than race, for example, that it's harder to hide or impossible maybe. But I think what this goes back to is more empathy on our side too. You know, and someone has said this, to show even the white cis man that they can be vulnerable if they want, just like we've been vulnerable at some point, that dealing, accepting and embracing and loving our situation, our disadvantage, if you want to call it like that, and making it our strength and our superpower, that has made us better people. This has made us, our parents, better people. This has made our siblings, our colleagues, better people. So try it out and you may feel better too. Because just like you said, Anu, as a young boy, that you needed to act up to fit the character. Maybe many people are still acting up, consciously or subconsciously. And I think our job is to embrace them too and make them feel that they can be vulnerable and they can also be the other, and maybe magically they'll also start saying everything else we've talked about.
Alessandro, I love what you're saying. You know, in response to Anu's question, which I think is actually really important, this conversation around otherness, both in gender as well as in race. Somebody said something in chats, which I can't second this enough. There's a book called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And I also want to be sensitive to time. So I'd like to call that book out and to shout out any other resources that some of the other panelists may have. Another excellent book that I highly recommend by Kwame Appiah is called The Lies That Bind Us. It's literally, I mean, I was reading it, I was just like, psh, 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 psh. On gender specifically, it really blew my mind. It's just a beautiful book. A lot of rich scholarship, but then also contextualizing it in story. And really quickly, I'd like to respond to this question of whiteness, because I think it's really important. When we're talking about white people, we're talking about two different things. We have to be able to hold folks accountable who present as white and are in positions of power and are using their privilege in problematic ways. A really clear example that everybody can understand is the policeman who had his glasses halfway up his forehead in a very casual manner as he had his foot on another man's neck and killed that man as the whole world watched. That is an example of a white person using their privilege in a problematic way. When we talk about white privilege, we're not talking just about white people. We're talking about whiteness. And the privileging of whiteness is something that's happened systematically over more than 400 years through enslavement, through colonization, through apartheid, and most recently through incarceration, through the way that capitalist system manifests. And it privileges people who are lighter skin over people who are darker skin. But it also, in a really sick way, makes that privilege of white people, it makes it so that people who are darker skin internalize that nonsense themselves, right? And sometimes dark-skinned people, as in a country like India, can assume positions of power and uphold structures of whiteness. This happens in South Africa as well. So we're talking about two really important and deep things. I highly recommend that people, you know, check out those books and get educated about this, or check out a podcast like Code Switch comes to mind by NPR. But what's, I think, also a big takeaway is if you're feeling resistance, lean into that resistance. Try to understand what's underneath that. Don't be intimidated by it. If you're feeling something when somebody calls you a white person or you're Black, what's going on there? Like, get curious about whatever is happening inside of you. And then do this external work of learning as much as you can about the structures of white supremacy, because that's a real thing.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, like, yo, if you not understanding how whiteness and European colonization has affected all the lands, you got some more reading to do. And it makes me uncomfortable that you would hijack this conversation where we're trying to share with you the connections that we have and how dismantling gendered oppression and dismantling racial oppression and all these things, it benefits us all, whether you're white, whether you're male, making those connections. Like, sweetie, you got to do more reading. Like, that's such like a 101 type of gaslighting tactic that we just don't have time for in certain spaces. We're trying to be progressive. We're trying to really, we don't need to get down in those back weeds of, oh, why am I feeling uncomfortable with being white? Why are you bashing me? When we're just telling you hard truths about the connections of how these different oppressions. Like, you know, when we say all men are trash, no, we know there's some great men out here, but we're talking about the structure and the system that allow men to be trash in their subtle ways and then there are big, huge ways. So yes, are we dumb? Do we not know that there are some great men out here? Absolutely. No, we're not dumb. We know that there's some great ones. But we also know that there's some great white people. But look, the system, not you individually. I know it makes you feel squeamy when we talk about the system, but the system is racist. And it allows you to make subtle and big racist decisions in your personal life, or be complacent about racist issues. And we talk about that, and that's what you gotta read. One of the great books that's new is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Like, it's so many books. Like, Black Feminist has so many books explaining this. Audre Lorde. When we talk about Patricia Hill Collins, when we talk about Bell Hooks, there are books out here. You haven't done enough reading if you feel uncomfortable when we call out white supremacy. Calm down, sweetie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Diamond. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Alessandro, Magogodi, Anu. This was an absolutely fabulous, fabulous dialogue. I wish you were here in my kitchen so I could give you a big hug and kiss.
Too.
Thank you all. Over to you, Sabinije. You're on mute, Sabinije.
There we go. I echo Susan there. Thank you to all of you for really navigating this conversation, because it is a vulnerable, it is a delicate conversation, because we're still in this transition. I also, applaud the people in the chat that we all need to express our different perspectives, and also to all of you speakers for sharing your stories, sharing your perspectives, and really, with a torchlight highlighting what has been the complexity in your lives, because it really is through an individual storytelling, and the other partner being, receptive for that story, that when we can start to allow conversations, allow differences, because it is a navigation. And today also shows that the importance of having these intergenerational, diverse, inclusive, and heartfelt conversations. And also these conversations are the roadmap to really raising the awareness that we need, along with education. Education by listening to others, but also, as many of you pointed out, that we really have to start to educate ourselves in all these different perspectives, and allow for our own inner truths to really surface. And that can really only be done by starting to be more mindful about ourselves. When we become more mindful about ourselves, that is the path opener to becoming more mindful about others as well. And there were so many things that were conveyed here. I'm just trying to find sort of a summary that would really give the resonance that you've already said. And I think that Anu mentioned, and I love that quote, the longest journey we will ever take is from our heart, from our minds to our heart. And I think we should just take a breath on that, because we are all one human race, and somehow we are learning how to become humans again, regardless of whatever color. Our color palette is our uniqueness. And now is the time to really allow for us to embrace that in each other. And it all starts with embracing it in yourselves. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and allowing yourselves to be vulnerable. And I do hope that we can continue this conversation, because it really is an important topic. So thank you so much, you beautiful souls. And I hand over to Jim.
Thank you, Sabinije. Thank you, Susan, Diamond, and Magogodi, and Anu, and Alessandro. This has been deep and groundbreaking and very courageous. And it reminds me of a point that Lester Brown makes, that we're in a race of tipping points. The world is getting worse and worse, and better, faster and faster. And I think that the upsurge of gender revolutionary transitional change is one of the most fundamental and important and positive megatrends in the world today. And I think it's going to play a very powerful role in equalizing the human psyche, the human soul, the human body as we move forward. So I just want to honor this, that these individuals here today, everyone, represent a upsurge of eros that in my view is coming from the earth herself. It's like a dandelion breaking through the concrete. And it's tortured, it's painful, it's incredibly dynamic. And within this context, I'd like to end with a poem, just as a way of saluting each and every one of you. And it's a poem from Rilke. Time and again in history, some special people wake up. They have no ground in the crowd. They move to broader laws, carry strange customs with them, and demand room for bold and audacious action. Future speaks ruthlessly through them. They change the world. Time and time, again and again in history, some special people like you wake up. You have no ground in the crowd. You suffer through the search of your own identity. You demand room for bold and audacious action because you carry strange customs with you. It's because the future is speaking ruthlessly through you. And that is what's going to change the world. So thank you. Thank you.
What's the author and the title of that?
Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, a German poet of the 19th, early 20th century. So thank you, everyone. Tomorrow we'll meet same time, same station for a deep dive in the contemplative tradition, another important mega trend, the upsurge and the revolutionary changes in spirituality. Ours is one of the first generations in the history of the world where spirituality is disengaging from religion. And we're going to explore that tomorrow. It's one of the positive, incredibly important megatrends that's transforming the human being. So thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow, 5 o'clock to 6:30 Central European Time. Bye-bye.
Everyone.